6-hour video shoot today.
Yeah.
So where are you living, Kingaroy?
Mate, I'm out at Kingaroy, out in the sticks.
What are you doing out there?
Just living the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I met an amazing woman, and I thought I couldn't see where it goes. So here I am.
Oh, mate, that'll be downfall of you, mate. Meeting.
Yeah, I know, right?
I've heard that before.
It's all downhill from here.
Remember, it's me you're talking to.
Mate, I found some old books. I'm thinking of throwing them into the fire. What do you reckon?
Oh, I don't think they'll burn. I don't think they'll burn, mate. There's too much energy in there for them to burn.
Exactly. Too many big words. The fire won't know what to do with it.
So what do you got in mind?
Well, look, first of all, I really appreciate you doing this. I know you're about to take off for a month.
Yep.
And have a well-deserved holiday. But, yeah, look, I've been doing these coffee chats, which is essentially just, a bit of a casual chat with interesting, intriguing, remarkable people. And you're obviously someone that comes to mind there, and I've heard your story a few times. But I think it's worthwhile to chat a little bit about that and the music days and all of that, but also what you're doing now and what you're doing in the future, and your work with charity. And you never believe who I spoke to this afternoon after I got off the phone to you.
Yeah.
Our friend David.
Oh yes, of course. Of course you would.
It's like,
I'm not talking to you, he's talking to me.
Exactly. It's like he knows. Yeah. Oh, Matt and Barry are speaking. I need to know what they're speaking about.
He said to me the other day, have you heard from Matty? I said, no. He said, let me know when you do.
I try to block his calls as much as I can.
Oh, he's amazing.
But he is an amazing guy, and I've interviewed him before. And anyway, he said, make sure Barry talks about the charity work he's doing. And I said, look, I'm sure we'll chat about that.
All right. Well, you just take it where you want it to go, mate, and I'll answer the questions.
Of course, mate. It'll be pretty casual, and yeah, I know it'll be. I'm looking forward to it, actually. So yeah.
How do you use this? You put this on Facebook, or how do you use it?
Well, yeah, mate. Couple of ways. So this is recording. Like this is obviously recording, and then at the end of that, I'll cut out the best bits.
Yep.
Which, knowing you, there'll be lots of those.
Yep.
And I'll put that onto my social media stuff. But I'm actually in talks with a radio station at the moment, and I'll have an hour spot, or the idea is anyway, to have an hour spot each week, and each week will be a different guest. And I cut out and you probably know radio as well. Like in an hour show, it might only be 20 minutes of content.
Yeah.
The rest is ads and songs and whatnot. So look, it could very well be one of those episodes as well, which I'd like it to be. So yeah, mate, just getting it out there. And if I'm being completely honest, it's also a good way for me to be improving my interviewing skills as well,
Yeah. Yeah. I was interviewed by a girl today doing this video I was telling you about, and it was so in depth. Like she just went into everything,
yeah, right.
And and she dragged some stuff out of me that I never thought was there. Like a 6-hour interview it was.
Oh, true.
This guy's putting together a lifestyle video of people's lives and in his business. He told me he wants me to be a template for that, and one of his first ones, and it went pretty well. I was pleased. He got what he wanted, and it was high quality.
Oh, good, mate.
You realise this is high quality because I'm in my pajamas.
Exactly. This is real.
This is Barry. This is Barry in pajamas, buddy.
That's the next book. Barry and his jocks.
That's you've got something very different to tell your viewers.
Exactly, mate. And that's the idea of these coffee chats, is that it is about just raw and real, and if we make mistakes and stuff up, it doesn't matter, right? Because that's life, it isn't. And I'm sure you'll tell some stories about that. You don't always win. You don't always get what you wanted. So I'm all for real.
Okay.
So mate, let's get cracking then, if that's all right with you.
Yep.
I want to go right back to even before and you'll go through this anyway, the whole Toombul music and everything else. But tell us about Barry Bull before Toombul music.
Mate, I don't even remember that far back. God.
The world was still flat, wasn't it?
Why do I just turn the battery on so I can do rewind? Mate, I was a young guy growing up in the Brisbane suburb of Indooroopilly in the 50s and discovered rock and roll. Didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but as soon as I listened to the radio, back in those days, there was no colour TV. TV was black and white. It was AM radio, no FM. No dishwashers, microwaves, computers, internet, mobile phones, none of that, mate. It was just the radio.
Yeah, the wireless.
The wireless. And we listened to the radio, and that's when I discovered Elvis, and it sort of shaped my life, listening to all this fantastic stuff on radio.
Yeah.
And so I really fell in love with music and bought my grandmother bought me a very cheap Yamaha guitar. It was my first guitar. And I was about 15 or 16, and what the hell am I going to do with this guitar? Because there are no guitar teachers. Everybody's playing piano, accordion, and piano and all that stuff. I didn't want to learn that. I was an old guy up the road, old jazz musician I found. He taught me a few chords. I learned to play those few chords, and I found 50% of the hit parade had those 4 chords in them because
exactly.
They were simple songs. Buddy Holly, Elvis, Cliff. Yeah, so that was me, and then I got a job at King's, which was a very big music emporium in Brisbane where the Myer Centre stands today, and that was my first job, and I was in my element because I was in retail.
Yeah.
And then something happened to my life that profoundly changed it. I heard the Shadows play Apache on their Fender guitar, and I loved the sound of it.
Yeah.
In 1961, Cliff and the Shadows came to Brisbane Festival Hall, blew me away. It was like a door opened and the rest of my life was waiting on the other side. I just had to have that Fender guitar.
How old were you then, Baz?
Probably 19, 20.
Yeah, right.
So I was, I imported one of the first Fenders to Queensland out of a catalogue. Cost 250 quid, which was almost the price of an FJ Holden.
Serious?
My parents went off their brain, but I worked in this music store.
Yeah.
Because I was able to put it on the Never Never. It was going to take me the rest of my life to pay for it. But
so that'd be like let's put that into perspective, right? So that'd be like an 18, 19-year-old now spending the equivalent of say $10,000 like they could get a vehicle for, but to spend it on a guitar.
It was a lot of money because
wow.
It was an American import, and I bought it out of a catalogue because I heard this song and this sound. And you know what? I look back all these years later, didn't realise at the time, but that's what ignited my career. That guitar gave me the start. So I joined a band, or formed our own band, which we called the Counts. And the next door neighbour played guitar, and my cousin played drums, and we had another guy who played clarinet and sax, and that we started to do not just rock and roll, but weddings and balls, because that was the way to make money in those days. There were 20 rock and roll bands in Brisbane in the 60s, but if you had a rock and roll band that could also play some old time music and some Latin American, so we got the gigs, and we're quite successful. And I was doing that for about 9 years while I was at King's, and that's when I was discovered and signed by a record company, CBS Records, who are now Sony.
As the Counts?
Well, no, I resigned from the Counts and joined CBS Records because the boss said to me, you can have this job, but you've got to give your band up. I don't want a musician. The job is too big, blah, blah, blah. And he was right. And I was trying to give it away. So I retired that Fender in the case for 40 years. Wow. And then I pursued my career. It was called the Australian Record Company, Matt. 1969, I joined them. I was the very first Queensland manager for CBS Records, who was they owned Australian Record Company, which is Columbia Records America, Columbia Broadcasting Systems. And I was the first state manager, and I opened the branch in West End, and An extraordinary serendipity entered my life. Leo Fender, who made my guitar, sold his business in 1966 to CBS Records. So here I am working for the record company that bought the Fender. So I then became the wholesaler for Fender in Queensland. And I thought, wow, how weird is this?
How the tides have turned.
And because I played the Fender guitar, I sold more Fenders than anybody else in the company because I already owned one.
You knew the product.
I knew the product. Anyway, I had a passion for it and as history shows, that guitar became world famous, but in 1960, it didn't have that credibility. It was just building with all musicians gravitating to these electric guitars. But phenomenal instrument. And what's unique about mine is that it was made by the man himself, Leo Fender.
Exactly.
So 5 years later, after starting the branch in Queensland and really being a wholesaler of records and musical instruments, which was where fantastic, exciting times, the company found that they weren't selling too many Fender guitars and musical instruments because they were too expensive for the retailers to buy.
Got it.
They were all imported. There weren't any Japanese copies like there are today. They were very expensive instruments, and they had a huge catalogue and range of products. So the company decided to open a shop in Oxford Street in Sydney called the Fender Soundhouse.
What year is this, Baz?
1974.
Wow.
And they, just a bit like Apple do today, having control of their own destiny with their products, the company decided that that they should have a flagship store in Sydney where the consumers, everybody, all the musicians could see the entire range of not only guitars, but basses, drums, pianos, the whole gambit.
All from Fender.
All from Fender.
Wow.
And I was given the gig. So in 1974, I was transferred to Sydney, wife and young family, and with no money and a big job. So I loved it. So the ACDCs of the world, who were just starting out in those days, were in the shop and throbbing on the instruments. And
so, how old are you at this stage, Baz?
About 34, something like that.
And you're managing this Fender store,
Soundhouse in Sydney.
Wow,
Big Smoke.
Wow.
And it was the best music shop you would ever see in your life because. It was just the range was huge, you know.
Oh, let me ask you a question, right? So, 34, you're still a young guy, right? You're still a young kid managing
that was
this.
A couple of years ago, of course, you know.
No, true. That's about 2 years ago, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why I remember all this stuff.
Why do you think they chose you?
Because I played a Fender guitar, and I was selling more Fender than anybody else in Australia, and yet Queensland was third down the list of population.
Right.
And I was just an outstanding salesman, you know that.
I do know that, but why do you think you are an outstanding salesperson?
Energy, passion, mate. Love it. Love it to death. You got to have the passion. I wouldn't be talking today if I didn't have the passion for it. I'd be in bed.
True.
Most 70-year-olds are in bed by now, baby.
That's right. They were in bed 2 years ago.
Here I am.
2 hours ago. Exactly.
I'm bloody Kilcoy. Cow clocking too. With a bloody beard. What did I get myself into?
Love it.
So anyway, we made so much noise at the Fender Soundhouse. Really did make a lot of noise. The musicians loved it. That something phenomenal happened with CBS Records. That Bruce Springsteen signed to the label in 1975. And CBS America realised that it had to get into rock and roll. Now, prior to that, Columbia Records, CBS Records, had a roster of fairly middle-of-the-road artists. Andy Williams, Johnny Mathis, Santana wasn't necessarily middle of the road.
Wow, I was going to say, he's not middle of the road, is he?
Simon and Garfunkel, Johnny Cash, Marty Robbins. It was a country and western middle-of-the-road label with a few rock stars in it. They decided to get into rock and roll. Yeah. Bruce was the first one that they discovered and signed. And the head of CBS International, who was my boss's boss, said to him, I want you to do two things in Australia. I want you to find an A&R guy, a young guy that is into the music, that can go out at night and listen to the bands, and like a talent scout, and find your own local musicians. And I want you to get a marketing guy who knows how to sell. Well, I was Johnny on the spot.
Surprise, surprise.
Burning the place down, and I got the gig. And so in 1975, Matt, I became Director of Marketing for Australia for CBS.
Wow.
It was now Sony.
Was that, I don't know why I want to ask this question, but I do. Was it a big jump in salary for you?
Not much.
Not much? Okay.
Not much. I mean, it was okay, but I didn't pay big in those days.
Yeah.
There was no big paycheck. It was.
Did you have to move?
Oh yeah, I had to move from Brisbane, and I had to buy in Sydney, and it was a salary increase, but it wasn't like the bank managers are getting today.
Yeah, I bet.
But it didn't matter. It didn't matter because I had the gig of my life.
Yeah,
this fantastic opportunity where I come from downtown Indooroopilly in the bush, and here I am in charge of marketing and sales for Australia
for the whole country,
in the world.
Wow.
And of course, what happened? It all exploded. Then Neil Diamond was signed to the label, and then you probably know that story I've told you. But we broke Billy Joel, we broke Meatloaf, we broke Boz Scaggs. It just went on with his energy. And of course, at the same time, the guy that came across in A&R, a guy called Peter Dawkins, signed Air Supply, My Sex, and Dragon, and it was my job to market those. And of course, they became big Australian acts as well.
Wow.
Very exciting time. And it was seat of the pants job.
Yeah, I bet, mate.
There was no money pouring in. It was just late nights, and hard work.
So your job was to market those bands in this country? Yeah,
get radio exposure on them, get Molly to put them on Countdown, get retailers revved up with them, and essentially get some chart action.
All right. Let me ask a question then. You said you didn't have much of a marketing budget, right? This is late 70s?
No, mid-70s.
Mid-70s?
75, 76. I was head of marketing through to 81 when I left. So during that period of 75 through to 81, I just was in charge of sales and marketing for Australia. So that meant when there was touring, I was in the middle of it. When Neil Diamond toured, I was in the middle of it. You know, it was pretty exciting times. But in the case of Billy Joel and Boz Scaggs and Meatloaf, we actually broke those artists. We got radio enthusiastic about the music.
In this country, was that what you mean when you say you broke them?
In this country, first in the world.
Yeah.
And if you often hear Billy or Meatloaf being interviewed, and they'll tell you that Australia got their career going.
Got it.
Because we got radio behind us. We had great relationships with radio, good relationships with Countdown, and it was all down to exposure and energy and getting that chart. And if you got a clip on Countdown, or you got the band live on Countdown, and in those days, MTV changed everything. MTV was the forerunner of Countdown. But before that, there was nothing.
Yeah. So there was radio.
So we'd get Billy along to radio and he'd talk about it, and then all of a sudden they'd be playing the song. And Piano Man was the song that broke him in Australia. And it was an interesting story about that because AM radio was the only radio format in the 70s. FM didn't start in Australia until 1981. And AM radio only played 3-minute songs. So that's why all the old songs of the 60s and the 70s
were so short.
So short. They got 1.5, play it through once, play the middle once and end it and finish it, and done under 3 minutes so radio could put their commercials in. And that was how it was regulated. And so Billy Joel turns up with a song we loved, 9 minutes long, because it was an anthem.
Exactly.
Anyway, we love Billy's music. And we, in conjunction with a local promoter, I say we because by this time I had a very small marketing team with me, young energetic people who had the same belief as just work your tail off and something you believe in. And there was a number of us.
Well, I want to ask a question there, Baz, because this is of interest to me with a lot of your successes. In that you said earlier that there wasn't a big marketing budget, yet you did some massive things in regards to getting these guys out to the people. How did you do it?
Well, you don't necessarily need money if you've got a hell of a lot of energy and passion. And that's the misconception in the world today. You know, we didn't have a marketing budget. There was no TV advertising of records in those days. Never. You just had to rely on radio. So you would get a relationship happening with radio programmers, the journalists who wrote, Rolling Stone magazines, that type of thing, street press, and whatever little television was there. And you would we'd get a meet and greet together, where if Billy was in town, he'd do some concerts, try to get exposure, get people to see those concerts, and run a meet and greet and get retailers along. So they're meeting the star or the artist for the first time, falling in love with their music. And that didn't cost too much money. We just hired the Seabold Townhouse or the function room at the Hilton and cater for that, get the retailers along. They'd get boozed anyway. They'd come along anytime just to have a booze. And then just make the grand entrance of the new music. Here's by Stags. We really believe in this. I mean, Silk Degrees is a classic album today. Yeah. But Silk Degrees we just loved. We as a company, we loved it. As a team, we loved it. And we convinced everybody else to love it.
Yeah.
Lido Shuffle and What Can I Say, those great hits. Which were disco hits, and that was 70s where disco became disco hits, and we took the music to the discos. We got the discos playing them as well. So when nightclubs were out there, they're playing to our music, playing to our that didn't take much money, man. That just took a lot. Okay. And that was how we did it. And I used that same tactic years later at Toombul.
This is probably a good time to segue into that. So when did you leave doing this, marketing role, this massive, impressive, successful career, and go, I'm gonna buy my own music store?
Well, I think the question should be, why did you leave?
Why did you leave, Matt?
Well, listen, get your facts together. That's the question. Why did I leave, Matt? Good question. Well, it was because I had a young family and I was never home. Always a light on in the window when I got home, but the kids were always asleep.
Got it.
I wasn't balancing business values with family values very well.
So you were successful business-wise, career-wise, but family-wise, you just weren't there.
Hopeless.
Got it.
I was never home. And I didn't. Naturally, I didn't like that. And my wife Kayleen had come to Sydney with the kids to support me, and I was not there to support her. And we struggled on for a long time because I loved the job; it was fantastic, but it wasn't fair. And I wanted to spend time with my kids, as every dad does.
Was that a hard decision, mate?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was. And life is all about the choices you make, and some of them are hard, and some of them are harder. Yeah, because here I was, a respected executive with the biggest record company in the world, hobnobbing it with the Neil Diamonds and whomever.
Billy Joels and all that, yeah.
And the Mollys and whoever is important or whatever. And so in 1981 I resigned for those reasons. And I returned to Brisbane and bought Toombul Music, as you know. And I didn't buy Toombul Music as being the next big career step. I bought it because I was absolutely worn out. I was never home, not just in Australia, but having a national marketing job. I was in America a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Relax, working out touring schedules for artists to come down, certainly looking at new music opportunities to break in Australia. And that's where our bosses were in America. So there was a lot of overseas travel, and I just burnt out.
Yeah.
And I was young enough. I was 38, I think, when I resigned from CBS. I was young enough because I had the knowledge. And I thought, well, if I could do it for CBS, I could do it for myself. I knew.
And why'd you come back to Queensland?
Well, because that was my hometown. I was comfortable there. My parents were getting older. Our family was there. And I also knew about this business, Toombul Music, because I used to sell to it. And it was a good business. It started in 1967. And it actually came about by me having flying down the owner of Toombul Music and a few other Queensland retailers to one of our meet and greets. This is what we would do. Rather than go to Queensland and take the show to... We'd fly them in. It was cheap.
Bring them to you, yeah.
A whole little road show in Sydney and have an artist perform and roll out the Christmas specials and all that stuff, And anyway, I had this conversation with Ron Klepper, who owned Toombul Music, whom I'd known for a long time because I grew up in Brisbane. And I told him I was pretty unhappy as a friend, as you do, over a beer one night.
Sure.
And I said, I'm really thinking I've got to change my career path here. And he said, tell you what, why don't you buy Toombul Music? I said, well, you're joking. He said, no, he said, I'd sell it to you. He said, I'm sort of a bit over it as well. It's a good business. I said, oh, okay. So I thought about that and thought that's not a bad thing to do, but it was only a stopping off thing. So I sold the house in Sydney and gave all the money to him.
And what year is that, Baz?
81.
Okay.
And came back and went back to renting, started again. But I had my family with me, and by then we had a daughter. So I had.
So hang on. Let me put this into perspective. So you sold a place in Sydney, and essentially all that you got from that sale of the house, you spent on buying this business, Toombul Music. You came back to Queensland.
Went back to renting,
and starting again at nearly 40 with a wife and how many kids? 3 kids.
Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it?
What'd your wife say?
She loved it.
Are you serious?
Well, she was back with her parents and the family, and she really loved it. And we were very comfortable with being back in Brisbane. But I saw a lot of opportunity in Brisbane. It wasn't a matter of just going back to where I felt safe. I saw the opportunity in Brisbane because by then I was in the national arena. I was travelling all around Australia. I knew markets. Westfield were expanding their shopping centres. I could see retail growing. The music industry was growing, and I wanted to be part of it under my terms. Now, that sounded like a fairy tale, but it didn't turn out that way.
Well, before you get to that, right, because I've had a few business changes over the last sort of 10, 15 years, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will be able to relate to where you were. A question for you is, was that a scary thing? Was that an emotionally scary thing for you to do, to go from this comfortable, successful job into I'm responsible, the buck stops with me, business owner? Was that scary?
It was bloody scary. It was a brave new world, really. But hey, I felt excited about it.
Because CDs weren't around then, right? They wouldn't have been around.
Who needed CDs? We were selling them by the truckloads.
In 81, you were selling CDs?
No.
Vinyl. Yeah, 100%.
So, look, it was scary when I look back at it, but there was no place to go then forward. I wasn't fired. This was my decision. This was a career commitment to my family and to myself, and my chance to do it under my terms, not somebody else's. And they really did control. All those corporations really control you strongly.
Sure.
And no different back in that era. Whilst it was great, it was still there was still a huge demand on my time. And as I was approaching 40, I was getting very nervous about the fact that where is this going for me? So it was a great move in hindsight, but it was like going from the comfort zone to the twilight zone.
Oh, I bet, mate.
It was really scary. I had no money, but I had an idea. I had a plan of how to do it. By this time, I knew the power of the charts. I knew that retail could contribute strongly to the charts, which influenced artist sales. And I figured that if I could sell enough records in those days, vinyl, I could be of importance to the music industry. I need somebody to help finance me. I didn't have any money. So I hit on the idea of bringing celebrities to the shopping centre because I'm not saying I knew the celebrities, but I knew how it worked.
Got it.
And I knew that the celebrities wanted the charts. So I convinced...
You knew the game.
And that knowledge was incredibly helpful to me to be able to do something really different in retailing, and that is be the first retailer to ever present celebrities on a shopping centre stage. It drove volumes hugely, and over the years it really made us famous because everybody came from everywhere to see some of those artists. But that took quite a while to get to that stage.
Do you want to tell us, like, I've heard this story before and it's super impressive. Tell us some of the names that you had in Westfield, or essentially because of Toombul Music.
Well, we bought the business in 1981, and I was off on a roll in 1981 with this plan. The first artist we bought was Benson, George Benson. Now, in 1981, George Benson was huge.
Massive.
Then we had Village People. Who else do we have? Bucks Fizz, the Mentals were starting off. We had the Cockroaches, who turned into...
the Wiggles.
Boys from the Wiggles were there. We did a lot of local stuff. Mathis was one of the very first ones, because I knew John from the CBS days. I'd worked with him, and John did an in-store, and he was a huge middle-of-the-road artist, but he was great. And then we got into the trying to get the superstar stuff, and 88 I got Cliff Richard.
Well, hang on, Baz. So you had some big names then, and the Mentals, as you say, were coming up. Why, like you just said then, we were after the really big names. Why? What changed for you?
Well,
you could see it was working, was it?
Well, I could see it was working, but these guys didn't do any of that stuff. They were too big for it, and they didn't do any of it. They didn't understand it. And I got the idea from Tower Records in LA when I was with CBS. I'd travel over there, and they'd have all the bands and all the artists. They were either playing in the car park or they were behind the counter at Tower Records in Sunset, LA.
Got it.
And I got the idea from there. Thought, wow, I've got a centre stage at Toombul.
Yeah.
I put them on a centre stage rather behind the counter, and that was the difference. And it took me a long time with Westfield to convince them that this was a neat thing to do, because I needed their marketing dollars.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Like, did you initially go to them and say, I'm thinking of bringing Cliff Richard into your shopping centre? How do they respond to that?
Well, I had to put, like anything, a business plan to them about how I wanted to do this. So I put a business plan to them that I need so much money from you committing to marketing dollars to be able to press and radio advertising, to let people know. The entertainment that you're providing here at the shopping centre is merry-go-round stuff.
It's face painting.
Yeah, and they said no, and I said, but look at the crappy bloody things you're putting on here. Nobody wants to see Rosa, all this stuff, the kindergarten stuff. The best you could do is Santa Claus at Christmas time.
Yeah.
I'm talking about superstars.
Yeah.
It took me a while to convince them, but it started to fall into place, and I'm just trying to think. We had so many in those early days, but we supported Australian artists. I mean, Tommy Emmanuel is a great mate, and I supported Tommy very much in his early career. Every time he had an album, he'd come to Toombul and play, and just a magnificent musician. In fact, Tommy today is probably the world's best guitar player.
100%.
He's killing him in America, but we had a lot to do with his career, and he would acknowledge that. So we helped a lot of local artists, country artists particularly. Slim came a few times, and Troy and Lee Kernaghan and that. But in 1988, I really wanted Cliff Richard, because Cliff was the Shadows Association, and I grew up with Cliff Richard and the Shadows, as you know. And he would never come. He would never come. So it was 1988, and I sent all the applications to the record company, EMI, why Cliff should come and sign his new album and meet the fans. No answer. I thought, what can I do to get this guy to come and do a promotion with me? I remember this day so well, matey, because the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, and you know this story, you could probably tell me this story.
That's all right.
The Lord Mayor of Brisbane, Sally Ann Atkinson, was campaigning for re-election.
Yeah.
So she came, when I saw her, she walked into Toombul. I said, what are you doing next Thursday night, Lord Mayor? And she looked at me. I was asking you for a date or something. I said, why is that, Barry? I said, well, I'm planning on presenting Cliff Richard out there on the centre stage.
Even though you didn't have him yet?
Yeah, even though I didn't have him. And I said, and we're going to have all the media here. We're going to have 2,000 people. We're going to have all the television. And wouldn't it be fantastic if you could come and present him with a citizenship scroll to the city, or keys to the city, or even welcome him here to all his fans, Queensland fans. What a great thing for the Lord Mayor to do. And hey, it won't do your re-election campaign. That was how I sold it.
Yeah.
I turned to a secretary and she said, what are we doing next Thursday night? I like this idea. And the secretary looked it up. She said, we're at Westfield in Indooroopilly. Before she could say anything, I said, you're wasting your time going to Westfield in Indooroopilly, Sally Ann. They're all going to be here at Toombul singing Cliff. I was making it up as I was going along. I thought a real while. I even started singing, we're all going on a summer. And the eyes started to water, and I could see she was a fan.
Yeah.
Keep this going. So she said to her secretary, cancel Indooroopilly. I'll be there. and she gave me the big Lord Mayoral handshake, and she said, ring the office tomorrow and make the arrangements, Barry, and I'll be there. And I thought, wow, fantastic, unbelievable. I got the Lord Mayor of Brisbane to present Cliff Richard.
I haven't got Cliff.
The next day, I ring Cliff's manager, and I fast forward this story because 2 years, because of course he came. And over the next 15 years, he came 5 times, and we became mates. We became friends. And in 92, after a huge successful promotion, 88 was the first one, then 92 was the second one, he took me out to dinner to thank me and get to know me, because he could see that this was a fantastic thing for him to do. As he told me, 3 hours work, I sell 500 albums, you give me a top 10 in the ARIA chart, why wouldn't I come? And I get the chance to meet all my fans. He was one of the few that really got it. And they came from Darwin, from Christchurch, from Perth, they came from everywhere. How can you beat someone like that?
Exactly.
And that, so he told me that story, and he said, Barry, when you rang my manager that day to tell me the story, to get me to come, he said, I was in the room. And he said, he put his hand over the phone and he turned to me and he said, Cliff, he said, you know that little booger Barry Bull from in Brisbane? He reckons he's got the bloody Lord Mayor. 2,000 people, all the media, Cliff had it down.
Oh, that's awesome.
He said, I just turned to my manager, I just went like that. Now, Matty, I'm used to getting the finger, but hell, doesn't it? And that was all it took.
Well done.
That was all it took. And then that really changed my world, because once I had the credibility of Cliff Richard, who continually came every time he toured Australia, others fell into line. The next big one we did in the same year, in 88, was John Denver. And we presented John Denver around an album he had called Some Days of Diamonds. Remember that album? I'm
not that old, Baz, but I do remember John Denver.
Thought I'd get you on that one. Anyway, Denver didn't want to do it. He didn't want to know about it. He was really grumpy when he came. And I said, what's the matter? He said, they're talking me into this. He said, I don't want to do this. And I said, we'll be fine. We're just going to interview. You don't have to sing or anything. Just wave to the fans and sign an album, and we're going to sell a lot of product, John. He said, I don't have to sing. I said, I don't have to do anything. Just talk to me and sit down and do some work. Relax. Okay. He wasn't, but I'm not happy. Yeah. So anyway, it was fantastic. It was unbelievable how many we sold at Denver, because he was huge in early 80s, Denver. Yeah. And that night I went to John's concert. And I always remember this because Tommy was the curtain raiser. Tommy was the support for John, Tommy Emmanuel. And I saw John after the concert and I said, hey, man, that was really great what you did today. He said, I loved it. Well done. Fantastic. I said, what? So you gave me a hard time. You told me you
didn't want to do it.
I was that. And he said, well, I've never done anything like that before, Barry. Yeah. He said, first time I've ever, he said, I was horrified to think I've got to go to a shopping centre and some bloody retailer interview me.
Exactly.
Anyway, so we began to get, and I think you got the idea of how it worked.
Exactly. But it works so many times, right? So you also, you had, you had the Veronicas come out, you had the Wiggles come out. Like, what are some of the other names that actually came and did a thing in store?
Well, Barnsey, of course, and Jimmy, Tina Arena, Farnham, John did a couple for me. Wiggles came 3-4 times. Harry Connick, when Harry met Barry, that was a good that was a good ride, that one. He was a cool dude. It was just, we were just on a roll. Country artists like Charlie Pride and Olivia came. Olivia was as nervous as anything.
Meeting Barry Bull's a nervous occasion, mate.
Mate, hey, I've lasted that, hey. I'm getting to that platinum stage, buddy. Hey?
So, all right. So I could easily listen to those stories, for another couple of hours, but I'm wary of time and I'm wary of you giving up your time. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that.
Well, mate, I'm in my pajamas ready to go to bed.
That's right.
I realise it's 8:30 at night.
So let's fast forward a little bit then. At what point did you realise that what you were doing was actually valuable stuff for other small business owners to know about?
Well, it was when I started to win the Westfield Awards. because all of this activity, we became a hero retailer for Westfield, and we only had one shop, so that's a big statement.
Exactly.
We began to win all their awards. In fact, we won more awards, Westfield awards, than any other retailer in the nation. Our record still stands.
And you had one store in the whole country.
Yeah, and these awards we were winning were big awards like Independent Specialty Retailer of the Year, national, out of 3,000 retailers.
Wow.
We won that 3 times, and it was through these activities that we were driving, and our sales volumes were big because of these activities, you know. So it was, and my message to everybody in business out there is always, you've got to do things different, find your niche, specialize in something. What is it you do different that nobody else does? Go out and be the best at it. And that's really what we found our niche by doing this, and we became renowned for it. And even though other retailers tried to copy us, we were there first. And even to this day, probably every couple of days, somebody pulls me up in the street and says, I remember seeing such and such at your shop, or I remember seeing whatever, or, you know, Michael Crawford, fan of the opera. I remember
exactly.
That sort of.
We forgot him.
It's great. There's an old saying, Matt, that people may forget what you do and they may forget what you say, but they never forget the way you made them.
Yeah, you made them feel. Exactly.
And we made them feel real special.
Exactly.
It was the experience. And this is what so many people in business today misunderstand. They must give their customers an experience. If it's a band on stage, give them an experience. If it's a retail offer, give them experience. But that's what people want, because that's what they remember. That's what they talk about.
Mate, you don't have to tell me that too many times. I've been in a couple of businesses over the last sort of 10, 15 years, and you know, a big part of my business visions have come from a few books that I read several years ago. I might just pop those up on the screen here. These have been close to my bed over the years.
Okay, you're actually. I wonder where they got to. They kept missing out on the back of my car. You're the culprit. He's like, listen, I'm really disappointed though. I can't see them tattered or torn at all. They don't look.
No, I've kept them in pristine condition, mate. I read them and then I put them back in the plastic folder.
Good on you.
I've also got a CD that you did too. I think it's called The Bullseye Principles. That goes alongside the book. And anyway, I don't want to look too much like a fanboy, but in all honesty, like a lot of the, you know, the bullisms that you would say, I did use through my businesses, and I will continue to use. And, you know, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your butt, but you know, it's been really helpful and valuable to me in my career. So I want to say thank you for all your help. And for the ongoing support as well.
Mate, it's all fundamental stuff though in those books. I only wrote them to capture those experiences before I forgot them that I'm talking about now. And also those things really work. The Bullseye Principle, I still use today. Those 7 steps, they really work. And it wasn't something I made up. I sat down and analysed over a long period of time what were the steps that I took to get to where I am. And I was an owner-operator with working on my own capital, and it was hard. And what were the steps? And those 7 steps today still really work. And that's why I'm pleased to hear you say that, because stuff I've written about not only chronicles my life and those experiences that I had in music that is wonderful to share with younger people and musicians who love music, but also the principles of how the industry worked. Even though things have changed, those principles have never changed. You still got to work your tail off and sit up at 8:30 talking to the Matt Collins of the world.
Exactly.
Fun, eh?
Exactly, mate.
We've always had a laugh together, haven't we?
That's the key, right? I don't think I've laughed so much in an interview so far.
You've got to have fun. Because you don't fun. In fact, it's the real love of what you do, and the love of life comes out in the way you present and talk to your friends. And if it's not in fun and friendship, it's not worth doing. And
why do it?
That's why I'm at that stage now where, I mean, you wouldn't believe today, if I could share this with you.
Please.
I was having a big day today. In fact, I'm damned if I know where I'm up this late. 6 o'clock this morning, I left home.
Yeah.
7 a.m. I was at Noosa presenting to the Noosa Rotary Club. on behalf of Hear and Say, raising money for deaf kids, and they presented me with a very worthwhile cheque today to give to Hear.
Oh, fantastic.
And I even had them singing Neil Diamond at 7:30. They didn't believe what hit them. I was out of there at 7:30, and I was in a video studio at 9 a.m. at Maroochydore doing a video shoot of my life. And this guy wants to chronically on video the stories that we're talking about now into a life story, a bit like an Australian story thing, you know. And I've been all day doing that. That's pretty neat where that's heading. It's,
exactly. And now you got to talk to me, mate. You finished.
This is the highlight of the day.
I'll take it.
I'm well rehearsed.
Exactly.
I remember the stories because I had to tell them 3 hours ago. It's all good fun.
Mate, you touched on the Hear and Say Centre, and I think it's probably a good way to finish this chat we've had tonight. Tell us how you got involved in that.
Well, my grandson, latest grandson, I've got 7 of them, Archer, was born deaf 2.5 years ago. And it was a real disappointment to the family that, you know, he had 80% hearing loss, which is not uncommon with newborns. 600,000 babies are born throughout the world every year deaf. And Hear and Say are a wonderful organisation in Brisbane that supports deaf children, the deafness of children. And their principal therapy sessions and support is cochlear implants. Now, the cochlear implant was invented by an Australian called Professor Graham Clark 25 years ago. And it's a sensationally successful method of hearing, particularly if the child is diagnosed with serious hearing deficiencies early, and a cochlear implant can occur early. So our little man, Archie, had his cochlear implant, bilateral actually, that's both ears, bilateral cochlear at 11 months.
Wow.
And because if you can't hear, you can't speak, you can't learn. In my day growing up, in that circumstance, they called you deaf and dumb. I mean, that was terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, there are solutions where young children can not only learn to speak, but lead a normal life with this amazing implant, because they implant these cochlear receivers under the skin against the skull, and externally on the outside they put hearing aids or microphones really that transmit to the transmitter, the receiver under the skin, and that receiver is connected to the cochlear nerve that goes to the brain.
Wow. So
it totally bypasses the hearing channel, and it's the brain that does the hearing. It's not the ear.
Okay.
The brain.
The ear just passes a message through, right?
Like seeing, if you can't see, it's the brain that does the seeing, not the eyes.
Got it.
It's the brain that's really taking in everything we're saying now, even though I'm looking at your ugly face. It's the brain that's taking this in, the information. And so I got really involved with this because as a grandparent, I was horrified at the fact that my little man couldn't hear music.
Yeah, got it.
Which was my gift, which was my entire life. So once he had his implant, grandparents are really important to be involved in the therapy and the training, as parents are. And I've been able to see the wonderful work that these people do. So I decided to do something about it and raise money for this. So last August, I ran my first charity function for Hear and Say, where I used my 50-year-old Fender that I told you about.
It's back. Here it comes.
And, I used that to play songs and talk about my life and the music that surrounds it under a concept that I call the gift of sound. So I've got this presentation I call the gift of sound, and I play my guitar, talk about my life, and then talk about Archie's life and how he's improved. And I actually put the Cochlear Kids behind the music. For example, with technology today, I don't need a band. So I download backing tracks, I play my guitar or sing to a backing track, and I then, with Keynote, with Apple Computer, so forth, I do my keynotes, embed the backing track into the visuals, and then the visuals become the children in therapy. Wow. So one of the songs I do, which is pretty potent to the topic, is Beautiful Noise. So I tell the Neil story that I just told you. 40 years later, how that song came back into my life. The lyrics are beautiful noise coming up from the street, beautiful sound, beautiful beat, clickety-clack, train on the track, kids in the... the lyrics were perfect. So as I sing beautiful noise and play my guitar, the Cochlear kids in their therapy come up behind. And it's a really powerful way of educating an audience to this real need. So I'm pretty committed to that. And I'm here in Say last month appointed me their community champion for the Sunshine Coast.
Oh, that's awesome, mate.
I get called a lot of things, but that's quite nice.
That's one of the nicer ones.
And so and that's what I was doing this morning. I just did a little 10-minute presentation about this, and I really bring awareness to audiences about the need for charity toward organisations like here in Say that are funded 30% from the government.
Yeah.
And the rest is by fundraising, people like me.
By awesome people like yourself, exactly.
And I've got a fairly big community base here on the Sunshine Coast. I belong to the Mooloolaba Surf Club, and I'm still playing my music and out and about doing my talks and even doing sessions like this. It's an awareness thing, helping bring the profile to this. And these are the sort of things we have to do as we approach the twilight of our years, you know. So
mate, you're nowhere near it.
There's no finishing line, Matty.
Exactly, mate.
No finishing line.
Hey, how's the swimming going?
Yeah, every morning.
Every morning. What time are you out there for those that are watching?
6:30 every morning, summer, winter, and I swim 1 kilometre across the Mooloolaba Bay with a bunch of like-minded people. It's a great thing to do.
Mate, I'm sure, like a lot of people that have watched this, that are thinking and wanting to say to you, you're just a show off, mate. You need to...
I know. It's a name like Paul, mate. What would you want me to say?
Barry Bull, you're a legend, mate. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to shouting you a coffee soon.
Me too, Matty. Stay in touch.
Good on you, mate.
Cheers, buddy.
See you soon. Bye.